Hi everyone, Roy here on my channel Roy Reads Anything. Anything including the works of Arthur Conan Doyle and his Sherlock Holmes stories. And I'm delighted to see that there is a Holmes event in February, which I will try and join in with to some extent. I've mentioned before, super busy, so my attitude to booktube is like that of a flitting bird pecking up the occasional crumb. But this I'd like to do as far as I can. So it's called, let me get this right, it's not called Holmes for the Holidays, it's called Holmes is Where the Heart Is. It's in February, when you get Valentine's Day.
Oh, I see what they did there.
Yeah.
Clever.
So it's not, I'm sure there are Holmesian romances, but it's not about those necessarily. So, yes, so the event is hosted by some groovy folks. Mark at Book Time with Elvis, Jim, Mystery and Mayhem, Randy Ray at The Literate Texan, and Greg, another bibliophile reads. So a sign of 4 hosts, and it has prompts as well, which I will endeavour to deal with. But week 1 is the one that's given me most pause. That's Long Canon. Read at least one Holmes novel. So given my super busyness, I'm slightly worried about my ability to read a whole novel. So I thought I would read a comic book adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles that I remembered from my youth, so it's been a good excuse to acquire 2 issues of a black and white comic called Marvel Preview from the 1970s, 74, 75, something like that. 75, yes. So in which The Hound of the Baskervilles is adapted into comic book form. I remember buying these. The first issue showed up in our local newsagent's shop, and I'm trying to describe, back when a newsagent's was a sort of world of wonders, the smell, if you imagine a kind of confection or an aroma that's drawn from chocolate, bubble gum, tobacco, not burning tobacco, but the great wall of cigarettes and pipe tobaccos and so on, and newsprint from newspapers, magazines, books. There'd be a spinner rack of paperbacks, all of that. It's super exciting stuff. And there was a Sherlock Holmes comic lying there. So these black and white comics that Marvel brought out, the idea was they weren't covered by the comic book code. They were like magazines. They could be maybe a bit more adult in their content, and maybe try and hit a new audience, I suppose. So this is where you got things like the Savage Sword of Conan and stuff like that. Marvel Preview had a different stories every issue or 2. So this is where Star-Lord first appeared, Peter Quill. And there's actually a letter in one of these saying, I don't think we need to see Star-Lord again. Ha! How about some billion-dollar movies lasting for decades?
One of my favourite characters.
Yeah, Dr. Dewey.
Even I. Decrier of the comic book genre.
Oh dear, yeah. Well, anyway, let's not get into that. They've turned on us. But look at this typeface for Sherlock Holmes. It's fantastic. And the cover, this painting with this glowing hound attacking. It's Arthur Conan Doyle's incredible mystery adventure hero. Plus, he gets one of the little idents in the corner, which is funny. So if I read this, which I will, I'll come back into it in more depth. Suffice to say, fantastic artwork, other bits and pieces, stuff relating to the comic book world of the time too. And yes, like I say, 2 issues too. Fantastic. So that's my novel reading plan for week 1, is to read The Hound of the Baskervilles in that form, and probably send off for the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu training course as well from the adverts.
Please don't.
Week 2, short canon. Read at least one Holmes short story. Well, that's, I'd have to be pretty darn busy not to be able to read a Sherlock Holmes story, because the short stories are pretty short. I might delve into one of my Strand magazines. I could read, for instance, The Adventure of the Greek Interpreter from the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes set. So the editors of the magazine, they sort of had their cake and ate it, in the sense that they're all badged as The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, so it's a bit like a serialised book, but they're self-contained stories as well, so you don't think, I missed the first bit, so it's not worth jumping on now. And you get these great Sidney Paget illustrations, so that's a possibility. And I've somewhere got a complete Holmes book, and I've certainly got one on my Kindle as well. So short story, easy. Week 3, and this is the sort of thing that's made me think, what a fantastic event. Week 3, Pastiche. Read a pastiche or parody of Holmes. Well, there's plenty of them, and I've read many of them, including lots of team-ups. I've read him meeting Dracula, A.J. Raffles, Fu Manchu, Tarzan. Maybe not going down that road. I thought I'd look at something I found in a charity shop a while ago and haven't even really cracked the cover. So it's the Mammoth book. It's not going to meet a mammoth, it just means it's a big book. The Mammoth book of the Lost Chronicles of Sherlock Holmes, 12 New Adventures and Intrigues. So I thought that was going to be an anthology from different writers, but they're all by Dennis O. Smith. I know nothing of him, or whether they're any good, and I must say, when it comes to Sherlock Holmes books, I often get booted out of them if they have either blatant anachronisms or things that nobody would say in English, if you see what I mean. So that's what, so I'm pretty unforgiving, but maybe they're great. The titles are good. The Adventure of the Crimson Arrow, Adventure of the Smiling Face. So I'll see what this guy's pastiche stuff's like, and if he vexes me too much, I'll find something else. Because there's many. In fact, again, Kindle got loads of collections of that kind of thing. Week 4, Legacy. Another great idea for a prompt. Read a work which you believe to be inspired by Holmes. So this would probably not include Sherlock Holmes as a character, but inspired in some way. Now, this is where my alleged busyness is actually kind of in this sort of wheelhouse anyway. So I'm writing a academic piece about occult detectives, and a big sort of impetus for that kind of story was wanting to jump on the Sherlock Holmes sort of bandwagon. But I don't want to just read that kind of stuff that I'm immersed in anyway. One idea would be Solar Pons. So Solar Pons is a character created by August Derleth. It's been written by various authors, but the original Derleth stories. That's what this is. In fact, this is his novel-length one. As you can see, Solar Pons is likely to be seen wearing an Inverness cape, a deer stalker. He is an avid pipe smoker, has an associate who's a medical man. They share digs together. He doesn't live in Baker Street, though. He lives in Praed Street, which I've seen on the Google Maps is 17 minutes walk away. So equally real. And they're in the same universe as Sherlock Holmes. So Sherlock Holmes is real, so is Solar Pons, but they're later on. So yes, I think it's fair to say inspired by Holmes.
I think that's very flimsy.
No, I can make a case for it. Make a case for it being.
Try, laddie.
August Derleth famously wrote to Conan Doyle asking if he could write Sherlock Holmes stories, and he was brusquely refused. So he wrote these
So he wrote
instead.
them anyway.
Yeah, well, no, lots of people do, but of course this was a long time ago that these started. So I guess they weren't. It wasn't the public domain character for hire and mass abuse that he is now. But I love the Solar Pons stories. In some ways, I prefer them to Holmes. I'll forgive things in a Solar Pons that I wouldn't forgive in a Sherlock Holmes. So make of that what you will. But might I be more adventurous in my legacy looking? So I was looking in one of my academic books, British Detective Fiction, 1891 to 1901 by Clare, Clarke, Successors to Sherlock Holmes. So what Dr. Clarke is focusing on here is, in those 10 years, is the period when Sherlock Holmes was dead. So Conan Doyle had killed him off. He was going to come back for economic and creative reasons, but during that sort of interregnum, there was a flood. The floodgates were open for Holmesian type detective stories, and a lot of these, the point that Clare Clarke makes is that a lot of them they're forgotten now. They were in ephemeral magazines. They don't sort of feature in the sort of official history timeline of detective fiction, and yet they were massively read, and you get lots of different kinds of things going on in those stories. So maybe I could hunt up some of these. L.T. Mead, who I know I've read some Mead and talked about her work, and so has Annie at Obscure Book Adventures. She had some other detectives, Dr. Clifford Halifax and Norman Head. So could track them down possibly. Also, you began to get female detectives. Apparently there were quite a lot of female detectives leading up to this, but now you get Detective Loveday Brooke by C.L. Purkis. So if I can track down Loveday Brooke... one of the illustrations there looks very like a classic Sidney Paget, Holmes and Watson sitting in a train carriage sort of thing. So you can sort of see they're sort of signalling, hey, look, you like Sherlock Holmes, you'll love this, but maybe it's kind of inverting it in some way or changing it. Like Sherlock Holmes is like totally dismissive of the supernatural, but you got occult detectives. You might get female detectives, and also you got characters like A.J. Raffles who were villains really rather than well, yes, who were doing extra legal activities,
nicking things,
yeah.
But nicking things from rich folks.
Sherlock Holmes doesn't half-inch the evidence, does he? No. Detective Hagar Stanley by Fergus Hume. So I have found some of these. I found one of the Mead stories, but it's in a newspaper, and although I've got a PDF of the page, reading, as you will see, reading a Victorian newspaper page might not be the easiest thing to do. And on anyway. So so maybe I'll dip into some of those. I've also got in the sort of slipstream of Holmes to maybe dip into if I'm getting a... Just as we had kind of Agatha Christie atmos over Christmas with things like Poirot-inspired scents and foods and so on. I've got some other books. Yeah, well, I'm not. The trouble is with Sherlock Holmes, what are you going to do? Smoke a pipe? Well, I can't do that with my broken heart. Take cocaine? Nobody's ever explicitly told me not to, but I kind of can't imagine that's going to be very good. The old 7% solution
don't do that.
won't mix well with the statins and the beta blockers.
And for God's sake, don't take up the violin.
No, well, I'm not taking up the violin.
No, don't take up the violin.
The Ormskirk opium den probably isn't very nice. I mean, the other thing too, I mean, you can get fancy pipe tobacco that's called Sherlock Holmes pipe tobacco, but in the books it says he smokes the cheapest, vilest black shag imaginable. That's just too disgusting for normal people to smoke, so he can keep that. Anyway, yes, I have got detective stories from the Strand magazine. Other detective stuff, mostly. It's got some Holmes in here as well. Some brand new book we got from a charity shop on holiday in somewhere in Yorkshire. There's some cool stuff in here, and another charity shop find I've barely even looked at. Oh, by the way, this is edited by Jack Adrian, who's a really good anthologist. I'd recommend any collections he's put together and introductions he's written. Ditto Peter Haining, incredibly prolific with his Sherlock Holmes Compendium. So this looks like it was once in a library. It's lots of bits and pieces, illustrations and articles. Might dip into that as well. Look, he's done something about the Marvel Sherlock Holmes comic. Ken Barr. Okay, so lots of possibilities. Hoping to be threading through Holmes is where the heart is during the holiday. There aren't holidays in February though.
No, we don't.
I think that works well.
We're going on holiday at the beginning of March.
Ah, well, that's another matter.
Ship will be sailed by then.
Yep. Okay, so TBR stuff there, and back soon with something else.